Very popular question, why is Audi cheaper than BMW? Yes, in fact, let's make that direct comparison. Right here, we're driving an Audi Q5. This is base model, 2-liter TFSI engine, and we'll compare it with the X3. We'll talk about the range of vehicle prices, and then we'll share our personal experience and why our reasoning is that Audis are, in fact, cheaper than BMW. Let's get into it now. First of all, I'm going to confirm, yes, in fact, a brand new Audi Q5 like this starts at $43,500 MSRP. If you get the tricked out, nicked out, SQ5 starts all the way up to $55,800. So not a cheap proposition. When you compare that to BMW X3 offerings, there's a little bit of a different price range. The base model BMW X3 starts at about $45,400. Meantime, you can spend as much as $73,000 US to get yourself a brand new X3 M version. That has the full-on all-in balls D performance engine that you get in the M3 and M4 cars. That's right, but you could spend almost $75,000 for a brand new BMW X3. So even at the base model, all the way up to the premium model, they are offset by at least a couple to $5,000 to even $10,000 differential. So yes, in fact, BMWs are in fact pricier in most cases, and the Q5 is one great example. The first example why in fact that might be is that when we talk about BMW, they're generally a vehicle brand manufacturer of their own. They innovate their own drivetrains, they innovate their own technology, and they pretty much do everything ground up, and they don't share it with a whole lot of other manufacturers. Audi, on the other hand, is pretty much splitting hairs with Volkswagen. As they're the VAG group, there's a lot of nuances that they share. I'll give you some examples. A lot of modern day Audis, you can get the same starter number from a modern day Volkswagen from certain model. Do a cross-reference. Parts like the brakes. A lot of the brakes are very similar. You might get a front brake from a Q5 belongs from the rear brakes from a Passat. A lot of these expansion tanks, you're going to find that same part in a Volkswagen. You're going to find a lot of these modules in all of their manufactured parts. Even parts like alternators, coolant hoses, and many other components you'll find. You don't have to look very far to realize if you cross-reference even parts like spark plugs and ignition coils, those parts often are shared from the Volkswagen parts bin. And because they're shared with the Volkswagen parts bin, every manufacturer wants to offer up more value, but do it so they're more competitive. So if they can basically put a lower cost part into a vehicle and sell it just under the wire of one of its competitors, i.e. BMW, then they have a car that's more competitively priced. They potentially could sell more vehicles and still manage to save costs at the bottom line at the factory when they start putting in their lower level parts. I would say look at similarly equipped BMWs and you'll find the brakes are generally a little smaller on a lot of the Audis. Other things, for example, when you look here, and I showed already rad hoses, they use this more of a generic radiator hose. Now, while these are more reliable, they are a simpler fitting. They have that spring all tension clamp on a rubber hose, similar to what you're finding in Hondas and Toyotas, and that is a simple part. Now, it is a cheaper part, and honestly, if it were me, I'd rather have parts like that under the hood because they're cheaper and more affordable. BMW goes and puts those snap-fitting hoses with rings on them. They're keyed. You can't mistake them. You can only put them in one way, and the problem with them, they're expensive. $100, $152, $250 for one hose, or you buy a full re-hose kit for $2,500. It's not cheap, but BMW often ends up putting in pricier parts. Not always better quality, pricier, and that's in fact where some of those costs trickle down to the consumer as well. Another reason why Audis often are cheaper than BMWs. Look at things like headlights. Well, they are LED. They're a simpler design than what you're getting in some of the intricate BMW headlights. You notice BMW now uses those blue headlights. They have those little blue filaments in there because that's their laser LEDs. Now, not all of them come with laser LEDs, but some of those do jack up the prices, and the complexity of the headlights you'll find in modern day BMWs substantially more than modern day Audis. Even some of these base vents, this is a more base looking design versus BMW, and BMW usually dresses up the front end. If you really look at the construction of this bumper, it's a very simplistic one piece. BMW often has a little more vents, a little more jagged details. Now, the modern day design theme is a lot more intensive in a lot of BMWs. Other things, for example, look down on the side here. This is a very basic design, nothing too complex. This is actually incorporated as part of the door. Again, BMW adds on extra rocker panels. Look at little details like this. Look, Audi now, in all their infinite wisdom in these Quattros and Audi, as we see there, goes and does this cheesiness. They go and put this fake exhaust tip on there. What is that? That's just to fake and deke you out and make you believe that you've actually got these exhaust tips, but in actuality, that's not a tip. There's nothing there. The exhaust is down in here, and if you look, that's just a cheap little muffler right there with a crappy little tailpipe popping out the bottom. So it's a very basic setup, and you don't even put a nice set of chrome tips or anything else there. Instead, they just put this cheap exhaust muffler on there and then finish it off with some cheap plastic. So a lot of the design themes are a little bit more basic, and it doesn't end on the exterior. You can go inside too. A very simplistic door panel. You'll notice on the lower level Q5s, you're going to notice you don't get a lot of extra drama here. It looks very simple. BMW, a little bit extra detail. Not a lot. Even on the base models, it looks very simplistic. But here, okay, sure, Audi does this great little detail. They have some of the best MMI systems, like you see right there, but they also utilize this on-screen piece. Now, BMW's got some other gauges where they incorporate a bit of analog with some digital blended in, but honestly, the seats, comparable. Okay, that's fair, that's a wash. But some of the detail in the dash is very simplistic here in these Audis, where BMW often steps up their game just a little bit more. It's not dramatic changes. It's not dramatic differences. It's the sum of all their parts. It's a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here means that if Audi can save a little bit on each corner, the sum means that they've saved quite a bit on one overall package. And that's where BMW, base model of everything, is going to be a little dressed down. For the BMWs, you got to get into some of the more upscale versions to get that real bling, highly dressed components within. However, BMW generally does a better job of bringing a little more style and pizzazz. They've got the theme lighting on the interior of the dash. You can change your colors and your themes to purples and reds and yellows, all sorts of hues that make the interior look very flashy. Whereas this vehicle here, not quite so much tickety-boo going on here. Okay, the next point, why BMWs typically cost a little bit more is because they're more sport-tuned. And yes, Audi creates some very dramatic vehicles that can go like the dickens, but generally speaking, when you're comparing the model SQ5s or the Q5s versus BMW X3s or the M variants, you'll find that typically most of the BMWs have a much higher level of performance available. First of all, the transmissions are dialed to tune to shift a lot quicker, better downshifts, so even the driving dynamics and the transmission are nicer. They create better tuned exhaust systems in the BMWs, particularly when you're dealing with the 6-cylinder from the 3-liter straight 6 in the B58, or if the M version is even better yet. They create drivetrains that make great sounds and go like the wind. But specifically, when we talk about performance, let's talk about horsepower numbers. So a base vehicle like this is a Q5, and this comes with a base model of 40 series, is actually a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder engine, and it makes about 200 horsepower. Not a ton of power by today's standards. And if you dress this all the way up to the top, you can get into the SQ5 up to about 350 horsepower in a 3-liter V6. But BMW's base engine in the X3 is actually the 2-liter straight 6 that makes about 248 horsepower. Clearly, BMW's base engine is up 50 ponies over Audi's. Then, of course, the 3-liter 6-cylinder called the B58 is their midline. That would be comparable to the 3-liter V6 of the Audi, and we're talking about 385 horsepower versus the 350 horsepower, so BMW's up on power even on the mid-level drivetrain. But let's not forget that BMW X3s also have the M variant, which does provide a powertrain anywhere from 473 horsepower up to about 500 horsepower in a state of tune that's required for that particular model. Now, remember, BMW generally is performance. Even the handling is going to be a little bit more impressive in most BMWs over Audis. Now, Audi has the Quattro system, which is great for snow and ice, so it's better potentially for off-road in those rough conditions when you're going up to the snowy Alps. But when you want performance driving, BMW is going to deliver the all-wheel drive system that delivers more of that capability for asphalt like this, that's actually going to get you sharper corners through the bends, as well as get you better lap time. So BMW is always stepping up their game in performance on every single facet. So the next point you have to consider, and I'm not a brand snob, so for me it doesn't matter. I personally buy a car for the deliverables, for the fun, the frivolity, the experience. That's how I look at it. But not everybody looks at it that way. Some people look at buying a car for the brand name. A lot of people say, hey, I just want a Mercedes because it has that 3-pointed star. There's nothing else going to replace that. Some people buy a BMW because it's also a purebred. It's conceived and born as a purebred as well. BMW doesn't go and share and split its hairs with some lower level brands like Lexus and Toyota or Audi and Volkswagen. No, Mercedes is Mercedes and BMW is BMW. They don't share any of the parts with other brands, and as a result, it's more of a thoroughbred. It's more of a purebred. It's like buying that dog. You go out and buy that purebred bulldog. It has a long bloodline of quality purebred dogs. And then you can go down and you can get for half price, you can get one of those mixed breed dogs that looks, it's 80% of bulldog, but it's not the full meal deal. And therefore you'll get it at a dramatic discount. Well, that's similar to what you get here. Audi typically isn't as purebred as you're getting with some of the other brands. Now, you can take that or leave it, and a lot of people do see it that way. I'm not that choosy, but some people are, and as a result, it's all about the branding and why the prices are priced accordingly. One reason, in fact, why Audis are a little bit cheaper than BMWs kind of ties in with some of the other factors. Audi, because they're a much bigger company, they're part of the VAG group, Volkswagen, Audi, Lamborghini, Porsche, you know, all those brands are all tied together. They're all part of the affiliation. They have a much bigger potential cash flow. They have more resources to experiment, to design, to theorize, and to basically create a product that is well thought out and more affordable to build. It's no different than a car dealership chain. You get one car dealership running solo, one finance person. They have one HR person. They have limited resources within that branch. But if you have one of those kind of business structures where there's 10 dealerships under one business ownership group, then what you're doing is you're sharing some of those background administrative costs because they're spread out through a bunch of different businesses. And the same thing goes on here. A lot of those resourcings can get spread around, not just parts, but the administrative. You also have more creative thinking available. So there's more possibility to spread some of those costs out. And as a result, you have more of that buying power. You have more of that power as a whole. Cut costs down a little bit, try to be more competitive in the name of selling more vehicles. And that just caters to a broader audience. You'll have more of these vehicles on the road because more people can buy them because they're more affordably priced. Where the Mercedes and BMW brands are pretty much set on their own to manage their own affairs, which means they have more creative control, but the downside is they don't have that buying power and that overall power and capability of spreading out those costs and resourcing. And with all of that said, check that video out. You're gonna love that one. It answers the age-old question, why now are the new BMWs more reliable than Honda? Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.